I wanted to talk a bit about shadow work, the ego, and rebirth as a kind of starting and a middle and finishing point to whatever I'm going to say. This might come out sounding like a bit of a rant too, so realize if I say something that sounds harsh, I don't mean it to be harsh. It's based off my own life experience and the things I went through and came to know inside. So for any that are still overly attached to any specific label or belief that they use to define themselves, I apologize right now for what I'm going to say that's going to offend you, most likely. Though if you have an open heart and open mind, you'll recognize that feeling within of feeling like you were just attacked based off the words that someone you don't even know just said on a screen. If you recognize that and then realize that shouldn't happen inside you, you recognize right then that there's a problem. There's something that's incorrect, that's not lining up within you, that's making you feel like that. So where to start? Because I used to act in the same way. Like I've said plenty of times, and these videos are the reason for this. And this process I went through is the cause of me making these videos to try and explain. So my own inner shadow work, when I realized finally, when it clicked that I had been lied to about so many things and that I could not define myself. I couldn't define what my own thoughts, emotions, and feelings were. I couldn't really define the who, what, when, where, why of me. But most importantly, the who, what, and why of me. Those three things, most importantly. All I had was the definitions that were fed to me throughout my life growing up. And it was those definitions and the way I was indoctrinated in school and taught to believe in all these systems, these materialistic systems that have all been set up like a big game and taught for me to pick a role, like we all are just taught to pick a role based off of the belief that what we were being taught was true because it came from some so-called perceived authority figure. And that was the biggest belief that broke inside me, was the belief in man's authority, when I realized how much man has used just language to deceive other man and write all these things into place based off of whatever. God, at first, those kinds of ideas were spread to control folks, to keep them locked in some materialistic state of thought without realizing they were more, that they were spiritual beings here, that all of us were equal under God. Folks with more knowledge than others took ideas and spread false beliefs and kept other folks in a state of belief in their mind instead of a place of knowing within themselves. So we were taught to just trust blindly in these so-called authority figures who themselves were taught the same thing and don't realize that they are just simply wearing the mask of their ego, the mask of their persona that they've built with all the labels attached to it throughout their life experience, as I did. For me, it was all the whatever labels: white, male, heterosexual, father, soldier, high school graduate, this belief, that belief, the other. None of that stuff was really me. None of that stuff was the who, what, why of me, my experience, my existence here, my lifetime here in this place. It was all driven by belief. So the shadow work inside me was to figure out how I had been lied to so much, and then research and make my own observations, both on the outside, looking at different materials and source materials, and especially things like occult information or hidden information that should not be hidden, and it's not. It's all out there. The revelation, so to speak, has happened, or disclosure, whatever you want to call it, because it's all been out there this whole time for all of us to find. Only we were taught not to know to look in the right places or to think that this process, this very real inner process of very real evolution that can take place in us as living physical, spiritual beings here, this is a natural process that we were supposed to go through, that we were never meant to actually go through and find out about by those that set up these systems and games. The games of religion, government, legality, all of it is to take the place of morality. And maybe to say it a little bit more clearly, divine morality and that divine energetic feeling that can be felt within when you fully connect to morality in your heart and soul and know that there is a creator, that you are a creation here in creation, and that's what all of us are. And that we were lied to. So for me, going back, to try and figure out, I went all the way back to childhood because I realized I was in a traumatized state. When all my beliefs crumbled, I was in a horribly traumatized state from my whole life experience, and especially the army and war and being pumped full of all those toxins and poisons. But when I thought back, it really started all the way back at birth. When I was born and pumped full of all those toxins that shut off my heart and put my mind to sleep and left me in a very programmable state, a state where I couldn't feel clearly, couldn't feel empathy and morality of the heart clearly. At first I could when I was young, as I thought back and thought that, well, yeah, when I was young, I really did have a deep appreciation for life and my own life. And I remember when I saw other life harmed, animals or men or women or others my age, that it would hurt me inside and cause me to almost feel their pain and to cry and to release that emotion of that negative feeling. I realized through school and the way I was taught to be, the whatever gender roles, the way they're taught and the way now they're twisted and broken. I was never taught fully to understand myself because I wasn't supposed to, because those vaccines were meant to leave me in a traumatized animalistic state of base consciousness, fight or flight mode, constantly not knowing but always having that authority to go to look for answers. So the appeal to authority, logical fallacy, is beat into us from the time we are little, from the time we are first poisoned or not as we come into this world. That logical fallacy is beat in. Trust authority, trust man's authority. Trust the authority figure wearing whatever costume that's telling you whatever it's telling you and blindly believe it. Don't know it. Don't know it for yourself. Just take their word for it. So being put in that early traumatized state of being born pumped full of poisons and toxins, it already put my body and mind into a state of shock. And then right afterwards, the circumcision. So they cut a piece of my penis off, the male genitalia, like they've done to so many others. And then when you look deep into that sick practice and see what's being done with that, where it came from, and you see this is all a part of this death cult worship set up by these occultists that have hidden things that aren't out there on these stages speaking to you. They use their puppets, is what I've come to know and realize. And that these poor folks out here that have picked whatever role or whatever label or whatever costume, as I did, they're spiritual children inside adult bodies, trained only with belief, without their own knowing, without their own wisdom, because they've been made too toxic to be able to regain their abilities and functionality until they realize it and actually make change. So for me, that shadow work is very much a part of that, and that leads to the ego death that I experienced, the death of everything, from even my name, when I realized that straw man fiction, that legal fiction of a name that was created for me at my birth, when I could not possibly be fully informed or consent, in which my mother was not either, as her parents weren't either. But still, I was assigned this fake name, this legal fiction, a number assigned to it, and it was created to make an account to play in their materialistic game of commerce, not as a spiritual living man or living being. No, as just some fake materialistic thing that my narcissistic ego could be built on with the labels that I built through my life experience. That's what I realized had happened. So part of it was to light my birth certificate on fire when I realized that it was a form of contract, as all this contractual law crap is. It's all bullshit. It's all shit written on paper. It's contracts being done by men, between men and women, and none of it is nature or natural or divine. None of it. So I lit that thing on fire because I realized I wanted to give that very negative piece of energy back in its physical form, to get rid of it, to turn it, to put it to smoke. Because that's what happened with my beliefs when I came to the knowing that I was not that fake straw man, that I was much more. And that's only one small example of the things that one comes to realize inside when one starts to put these labels away, put them away with knowing. So, in some of the videos afterwards, after my own very real ego death that took place inside, and that takes place by facing those inner demons of belief, because that's what those demons are. Those demons are the beliefs that have been created inside. And then the brain has been pumped full of all these images from all this programming, from these things that you can look up the patents for and realize were designed to keep us under the mind control that we were taught, and to get us to perpetuate our own enslavement unknowingly, while being totally entertained and sidetracked and distracted. But to play out the very real images that are projected constantly 24/7 of debauchery and immorality in real life situations that folk go out in real life and actually repeat and play out. It was all designed to do this from long before I was even born. And all of this can be looked into, researched, and known. And as you come to know these things, those labels strip away from the inside of yourself when you can realize that you're more than what you were taught. And then you find out for yourself, in yourself, just what that means, what you mean in here in creation, in connection with the creator, a creator that very much knows and saw everything you did and everything you thought, everything you could not control that ran through your mind that you either acted on or did not. That's what I felt inside when everything crumbled for me. I felt like that spiritual child trying to stand there and answer for myself to a power much greater than anything that exists down here, no matter what costume it wears. And I had no answers. Not even the who, what, why of me in my experience and what it was and what did I gain from it and what did I try and do here. That's when I realized now, realizing what I realized, I have to try and help and convey this message. Because for us to know ourselves and to know ourselves deeply and to become a true expert on ourselves and to gain self-mastery, self-ownership, self-rulership, and realize that that cannot extend outside oneself to others, that one cannot own and rule and control others. Only oneself, when one truly grows into the spiritual being that they were meant to be from the start, but were held back from being with all the labels that they were taught to attach themselves to. That's a scary place to realize none of that's real. And a lot of folk, when that happens to them, their mind is still trying to reconcile images from a lifetime of what they've seen and experienced and witnessed. One's own actions and thought have to be taken into account fully and recognized for what they were. Were you playing out these actions and causing harm to others only because you were tricked? If you were, you have to fully accept responsibility for doing those actions and also being tricked. Though the blame lies outside on the ones that tricked us all, you have to realize that most of the ones that are tricking each other don't even realize they're doing it right now because they don't know themselves. And that has to be recognized so we can stop and try to help each other grow, not attack each other because of this label, that label, this belief, that belief. It has to stop so conversation can ensue. Conversation can happen without physical contact or interaction. And that's how it's supposed to happen. Then logic, reason, and creativity can win out while it's aligned with morality. When it can be expressed and spoken clearly enough, these broken patterns of thought and logic can be corrected in the ones that need to correct themselves. So for me, just a real broad just example, because it's based off of looking back at myself, saw the costume I was wearing, saw how I acted while I was wearing it, realizing I fell into the trap of appeal to authority, realized I was in the mindset of slave master mentality because I didn't have full self-mastery over my own mind. I was always looking for authority and what it said to do and how to do it. When I stopped doing that and I saw myself for what I was, it was embarrassing, deeply. More importantly, on top of that, and past the shame of whatever, it's getting through and feeling those feelings, but then it's I kind of lost myself. I apologize. The feelings of shame for acting the way I acted. Where was I going? It's the recognition that I simply had to stop doing those actions and stop thinking those thoughts and stop feeling stop being driven by emotion of my mind that I couldn't control, that was full of others' beliefs. It was really reining myself in fully and keeping myself reined in the present moment for as long as I could each time until it became a constant state of being where I no longer had to deal with intrusive thoughts of a picture popping up in my mind based off of a word spoken because of some belief I had about the topic. It took work to stop all that. It took even more work to stop the thought patterns of addiction that were going on in my mind. Here's one thing I realized, and I remember I was going to talk about like what I see in politicians and how they speak, and really I see empty shells of folk, really, that are still trapped in that master-slave mentality mindset and that belief in government, the etymology of which is control mind. And they're seeking to gain a higher position in that class of rulership in a system of classes where these classes should not exist. That's what I was going to say about that. Now getting back to whatever else, where else? I was off on something else. I was about to go somewhere. Thinking back in my life, even the way I was taught to eat and the addictive thought patterns. The flesh, I was thinking about, what do zombies eat? Well, according to all the ridiculous programming I was shown growing up that I enjoyed so much while I was hypnotized and under mind control, I realized, yeah, zombies eat flesh. What was I doing? I grew up to live off of eating flesh, eating the life energy of other sentient life, taking it into myself. All that pain and all that trauma, whatever that life experienced, in consuming it and using that as my fuel, my energy to conduct my actions in this place. And it hit me real deeply in the heart when that care and that empathy came back for life, especially when I considered myself and the part I played in the causing harm and the perpetuation of all these systems of enslavement we're under and suffering, I realized that had to change, and I switched to just the plant-based diet. And in during this couple few years of this process, it's a very real process of physical rebirth where the body does heal and correct itself as the mind is corrected, as the addictive thought patterns are corrected, and the toxins are no longer consumed. When I stopped taking all the vaccines, when I stopped taking the pharmaceutical pills, when I stopped eating the processed foods, when I stopped eating the flesh, when I stopped treating myself like a toxic waste, garbage disposal, my body and mind started to heal quicker than I even realized could be possible. And then I realized very deeply that it could happen for everyone else out there, and they could break themselves out of this mind control they're under. And while they're stuck in their adult body, in their spiritual, childish mindset, they very much can, right where they are, do the healing they need to do. Stop the thoughts they need to stop. Stop the addictive patterns of behavior they need to stop. And change right where they are in whatever costume they're wearing and whatever part of the system they're in. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We all, each of us, just have to regain our ability to gain full control and to be able to define our own thoughts, emotions, and feelings for ourselves, by ourselves, in ourselves, with language that makes sense and lines up with morality, because that is the path. If you ask me, that is the way. It takes living like that and being like that, not just confessing that or professing that, attached to a specific label or moniker or belief. It takes feeling that. And when you feel that, when you start to correct those things and that starts to happen in you, it will happen, and you will grow spiritually, and you'll see things in this world that you never thought you could see because you grew up not being able to see. Just like I did until I could. And that's when you leave the land of the blind, so to speak. And you wake up and you see it for really what it is fully, and realize that you are fully here in this material body, in this material realm, for a limited amount of time here to physically grow, experience, change, find meaning, to fulfill your purpose, whatever that might be. I'll tell you, while folks are still trapped in these different labels and these different belief systems, and folk continue to believe this stuff that's being shown to them, it's only going to get much darker, much faster, and the suffering is going to increase exponentially because it's set up and designed to, and it's playing out. And folks are playing it out unknowingly in all their little compartmentalized pieces of all the systems and corporations. They're doing it for the ones that set up all these games for them to play. Each of us, when we stop being a part of the problem that is the system, and we change our behavior, and we change our thought processes and align to morality, we, each of us, indeed stop becoming a part of the problem. And we become a part of the solution by communicating to others just what the problem is, and helping, hopefully, to lead others to realize that the problems all lie within each man, woman, and child out there that are still locked into their beliefs that they were taught. And only they can fix that. Only they can reconcile that. Only they can deal with all the trauma that they've experienced and caused within their own life experience, because they are the ones that lived it. The problem is so many have experienced so much, they constantly try to live in a state of other or a state of less than because they don't want to fully realize inside and go through that fear and pain of actual change. And the pity of that is it's that very real inner work and that very real taxing mental and spiritual process that happens inside that causes the very real physical healing changes in that individual's body. And I don't mean to use that term individual as corporation, like the way it's used right now, like as is person used as to mean corporation, as is these countries. The United States it's a corporation. It's all corporations. That's what you have to realize, that you are a living man, a living woman, a living child of one of the two genders that will eventually grow into a man or a woman, and that choice is made for you. I would say by the Creator. Does it have to be the Creator? Do you have to really realize there's God right now? No. You at least had a Creator by being born to two parents. They created you. But it was that divine spark of your consciousness that is you, that is your soul. And whatever that is, it gets to physically manifest in a male or female body. It's up to you to realize that and then be that and realize that even though you were only physically a male or physically a female, that you still have both energies within. So you can use that more male electric protection energy or logic or mind or whatever type of energy, however you want to put it, or the sun. You use that energy in conjunction with the magnetic energy, the female energy, the moon energy, however you want to put it. It all intertwines within each of us. We physically represent one or the other. Stop confusing these poor children and destroying their lives before they even start. How do you do that? Don't inject them with the poisons of the vaccines. Don't feed them all this sugar. The sugar drives disease and cell mutation and feeds cancer. Stop showing them these devices with these screens that pump out all the debauchery and nasty programming. Teach them, guide them, but you can only do that once you gain wisdom for yourself. I realized that because I really screwed up my kids. Because all I did for them was teach them my beliefs until just a few years ago. So I didn't screw all of them up all the way or anything. And like I say before, that's a hard pill to swallow, and that's hard to face within oneself, to realize that one was so wrong, and then they revisited and perpetuated that same cycle of harm on to the ones they love most and to the ones they don't necessarily love, but the others around them that are sharing this experience with them, just trying to get through it just like everyone else. So I guess that being said, I'll leave it there for now. Thanks for listening. One more thing. I posted that video just a few days back trying to warn about Iran because of the same types of actions I used to play out in my costume when I was in the military for the government, doing all these things without realizing what I was doing, who I was ultimately doing it for, and more importantly, what I was ultimately doing it for. And the what and the why, that part of it was really to drive this dark system of enslavement and death worship, and to visit suffering on others only because I was following orders. But I mentioned something to try and prevent this thing from spiraling further out of control into the whatever their version of Armageddon they want to create, and that they're getting folks to play out for them with their costumes and labels attached, however they view themselves in that little compartment. Everyone's collectively being used right now to play out this nasty ass Armageddon looking scenario while everything's being destroyed currently everywhere where we all live. while others are out trying to do whatever. Think about that. Because right the next day after I said that, of course, there was that so-called attack, whatever. I see that Gulf of Tonkin, same kind of thing happening in the Gulf of Oman, trying to set up just what they've been playing out all along. Please stop falling for it. Stop falling. Stop falling for what these word sorcerers are telling you and showing you. Look at them. Look at them when they speak, and then logically think about what they're saying. It doesn't even make sense what they're saying because it's all operating out of a place of belief. They're trying to creatively paint a picture for you to attach to of this illusory group called Iran is an enemy, period. Now go, speak it and repeat it and feel it. Though you won't feel it because the vaccines have cut off too deeply for most and all the toxic food. Though you will emotionally react and you'll get fired up and act like a clown over it, go into clown mode because the circus is running, because what these screens have been shown to create that mind circus. That's what has to be controlled. That can happen when you stop consuming the toxins. Stop eating them, stop drinking them, stop injecting them, and stop looking at them. Then when you do that, you can look deep inward and see you for what you are and what that means. Because it's a whole nother world to explore inside oneself. A whole universe, you could say. Universe as in one verse. Because there's only one verse that you get. That's you. You get to inhabit your universe filled with all those other little life forms that make up your cognitive function overall. It's a lot to consider. A lot makes up each of us, much more than we were taught. Consider it. Do some research. Look inward. Consider. You might be surprised as to what you find out and as to what you see, but don't be surprised too long. Get yourself back down to solidity, onto earth, on the ground, and realize it's all happening, and we all need each other's help. Now more than ever, I might say. Though I can't know for sure. We each can only know what we know. And until then, you can only believe what you continue to believe. And that world isn't real. Thanks for listening.